So the next thing we want to do is what I would call user validation. So user validation is just a way, user input validation. That is a way of ensuring that whatever the users try to enter into your system is what you expect them to enter. So if you are expecting them to upload a file, you are going to be checking if they are uploading the type of file you expect them to upload. If you are expecting them to enter a number, you are going to be checking if they are entering that number you expect them to enter. So we'll start with our login function. So from here we are asking the user to enter their account number. So let me show you what happens when the user does not enter a correct account number. Let's clear this and let's run the code. Now I have an account, so I'll just say yes and then go ahead to get my account number here. Now if I enter a wrong account number, you see I entered P there, I get this error, which we don't want to ever happen. Imagine you go to your ATM and you insert your ATM card and you get this kind of error. I mean, your trust for that bank will just vanish, because you'll be wondering how this kind of thing happened. You'll be wondering if you got hacked, you'll be wondering if you are losing money, you know, and so on and so forth. So you don't ever want this to happen, which is why we do input validation. Validation is just a way to catch this type of errors before they happen, so that when they happen you can inform the user appropriately. So what I should have done here is to tell the user, you have entered an invalid account number, please try again. So look at here. So even though I have this instance here saying I have wrong account, invalid account or password, I am not actually checking if they are entering a correct account number format. I am only checking if the account number is in my database, and entering a wrong account number format totally breaks my code, and that is a problem. So this is why we are going to be doing user validation, and this is actually why we do it for most of the things that we build in software development. You never trust user input, because users are weird sometimes. We are also users and we can also be weird. When sometimes we just make mistakes, and sometimes we just intentionally want to see what happens when we try to do something we are not supposed to do on a system. And developers do this a lot. They just try to break your system as much as possible. Most of the time it's just to help you improve, but again, you have to, on your own side, you have to catch these kind of errors so that it doesn't happen. And sometimes you even catch all types of errors and say, just in case I couldn't catch this error, let it just throw out this particular message as a placeholder for any type of error that I could not catch. This is always a good idea while developing. So let's quickly start working on our validation. I'm going to define a function and say login validation, or let's be more specific. So let's say account number validation. Okay, so it's going to receive account number as parameter, because that's what we are trying to validate. So what this is going to do is to check if the account number they entered is a valid account number. So let me just do a presentation now, so it's easy for everyone to see. Right, so here we are receiving the account number and we are immediately converting it to an integer. But if they enter something that cannot be converted to an integer, then it throws that error we got earlier. That error is called a value type error. Is it value type? Hold on, let me check that again. But I believe it's value error. I'm going to open my terminal. Yes, that's called value error. So that's just like a type of error in Python. That's because they are entering a value that is not allowed. I mean, technically not allowed for this particular input field. So what we need to do is to check if what they are entering is what we want them to enter. So let's come back to our function here. I'm going to create one more space. So our function here, and say we are going to be check if, okay, this needs a space, if account number is not empty. So this is important because if they don't enter anything here, it's still going to throw an error. So we need to check if they actually entered something there. There's a typo here. Okay, so let's fix that validation. All right, and I wonder why I have this error here, but I believe it will go away. So again, the next thing we want to check for is if account number is 10 digits. So for me, I'm using 10 digits because that's what we use in my country. But I mean, you can try anything you like. Well, I am going to be checking if it is 10 digits because no account number can be less than or more than 10 digits. And then finally, I'm going to be checking if the account number is not a string or if it is an integer. So if they enter a float, if they enter a string or any other thing, it should not work. It should only be accepting an integer. All right, so let's start doing that. The first thing we need to do is the first thing I wrote here. So we'll say if, all right, no need to have that, account number. So this is saying if account number actually exists, if they send us account number, else if they don't send us account number, then we return false. That means this validation failed. We can even print out a message here saying account number is a required field. So returning false here means this validation failed, and that's what we are going to be checking for here once we start using this validation here. All right, so here if the account number exists, if this variable is not empty, we then check if the variable has 10 digits. Now to do that, we will need to firstly convert it to a string, then check if that string is up to 10 digits, because you can't check the length of an integer, you know, it's an integer, so you have to convert to a string. To convert to a string, you've already been doing that. Let's take this out. We just cast it. This is called casting, by the way, converting to a string by doing what we've been doing. We're doing for the integer actually. So this is called casting. We'll just be doing that for account number to convert it to a string. So we've converted it to a string. Now we need to check the length of that string, and then we'll do this to check the length. So length here means the length of whatever is in this bracket, and then we'll say if the length is equal to 10, that means it is good. Otherwise, print account number cannot be more than 10 digits, and then we return false again. So we'll know that validation failed. And then our next step is to check if account number is an integer. Now this is where we'll be using a new concept called try except. Now we want to check if the account number is an integer. The best way, one of the best ways to check it if it is an integer is to try to convert it to an integer. So if it is already an integer, converting it to an integer will throw no error, it just goes through. If it is not an integer, or if it is something that cannot be converted to an integer, then it throws an error. So what we would try to do is to try to convert it to an integer, and the response we get from that trial will determine if it's an integer or not. So to try in Python, we do a try, and then we try to convert by doing casting again. Try to convert account number to integer. So we are trying to convert this to an integer. If that doesn't work, then we say except. That means we are trying to catch an exception, which is we are trying to catch the error that would happen if this conversion fails. So what that means is try to do this, and if it does not succeed, then catch the error that might happen during that process of trying to do whatever it is you try to do in the try section. So the error that happened, like I showed you earlier, is value error. And then I'm going to now say print, okay, print should be lowercase, print invalid account number should only should be integer. I mean that kind of helps. So this way we've been able to catch the error, and then we return false because we want to use that to check later. And now if we are able to do this conversion, then we return true. So the only time this validation will succeed is if we are able to convert the account number to an integer. So that's what we will be doing for validating the account number here. I'm not sure why. Okay, I think it's the space here. Okay, yeah, that was the problem. So what we have done is collect account number, check if account number exists. If it does, then we check if the length is 10. If it is, then we check if we are able to convert it to an integer. If we are, then we return true. Now to use this function, I will come back here. I'll remove int from here. We don't need to do that conversion at first. So once I receive the account number from the user, I'm going to validate the account number by doing validate account number and then enter account number from user there. So now we are sending account number that the user enters to this function, and that function is going to perform all of this on that account number and afterwards return either true or false. So let's say is valid account number. So this is a question we are asking. Now if the account number is valid, if is valid account number, that means we can then proceed to ask them for all these other things here. So the only time we will proceed to ask them for their password is if they have entered a correct account number. And how to check if they've entered a correct account number is being done by this validation function here. So before we try this, there is something else we need to check. Because we are no longer converting to integer here, we will need to now convert it here, which is where we are actually comparing the account number that we have in the database and what we have here, because this should be an integer. So our conversion will now happen here. Now keep in mind, this part will never throw any error because we have already checked if the account number can be converted to an integer. So at any point when we decide to convert it to an integer, it is not going to throw any error because we have checked. If it is not a correct account number, or if it's not going to be convertible to an integer, then it will have thrown this error here, and we have already handled that. Now there's something you should note. It is possible to capture multiple types of error here. Let me just show you what that means. I'll say except there's something called type error too, and then here I can print out another, I will say invalid account type. That doesn't really make sense for our use case, but this is possible. I'm just trying to show you invalid account type, and then also return false. And so this is all we need to do to validate the account number. Maybe you can decide to do more, but basically this is what we need. I'll just delete all of this because our function is descriptive enough. Anyone that looks at this should be able to understand what we are trying to do. And also we've already done this, and this should work properly. So if this returns true, then we go ahead to do this. All right, so let's just run one test and see if this works properly. So I'll save that. I will exit out of presentation mode and just run my code. So I'll go to my terminal, I'll clear this, and then say python auth.py. So I have an account. So yes, my account number is here. So what I will do is to enter the wrong account number, and then I get invalid account number. Account number should be an integer, which is good. So I mean, what we could have also done is, rather than just get out of the, like here now, rather than just basically break out of the application like we did here, we can send them back to this part here. So after this, if this doesn't succeed, then we can basically just send them back to initialize the platform. So I'll run this again, then show you what I mean by what I've just done. So yes, I have an account. I'll enter my fake account number, make sure it is wrong, and then it sends me back here. So it says invalid account number should be an integer. Then it says welcome again. This is redundant, but again we have to do it. And then, do you have an account with us again? Because it seems like you don't have an account. So we are just trying to check if you actually have an account with us. All right, so let's enter one again. and enter a correct account, or you know what, let's try to enter an empty space and it says the same thing, account number is a required, okay, that there's a typo there, let me look for it. So account number is a required field, not this field, so it should be EL, yeah, so that's better. That's because I didn't enter anything. Now finally, what else can we check? I can check if my account number is not up to 10 digits. So let's say yes, I have an account, and just enter less than 10 digits, and it gives that error again. Account number cannot be more than, okay, so account number cannot be less than or more than 10 digits. So that makes sense. Alright, so let's try one more time just to be sure. And it says what we, oh yeah, I didn't rerun the code, but basically you understand what I've just done. I have been able to capture that error that could have caused our program to completely break. So it's always a good idea to capture error and try except method. Function in Python works very well to do that. You can use try and catch in different ways. So for example, while we are registering accounts, if for whatever reason this account generation fails, then this shouldn't go through because it is a required field for this thing to work. So you can add a try here and say try account generation. Okay, if that fails, then you should definitely end the program and say account generation failed due to, I don't know what, internet connection failure. It could be any reason, but I'm just going to give this reason for now, and then exit or quit the program. So after printing that, I'll just completely quit the program or go back to initialize. Okay, yeah, that's also a good idea. So let's capture a particular type of error here, value error. For now, of course that might not be the error we'll get, but I'm just trying to say that you can do something like this, so that if for whatever reason account generation does not work, say imagine our account generation function does a lot more than this, you can try it. If it doesn't work, then throw out this error rather than actually throwing out a very large log for the users to see. There are so many other things you can do, like for here you can still do a validation here and check if what they entered is an integer or if it's a string, and then be able to throw out the proper error. Because right now, if I should enter a string, then this throws error. Yeah, that's because I'm expecting an integer. So you can do that validation for all these things. It is important to validate user input. Users can never be trusted.